Hello viewers, and thank you so much once again. This is the Big Talk with me, Costa. Today we have got another episode with Youth Accountability Initiative Founding Director, Mr. Cuthbert Masiwa. I'm going to give you an opportunity to meet our viewers and also in briefly telling us what is Youth Accountability Initiative.
Okay, thank you very much, Costa, for hosting the young people, especially Youth Accountability Initiative, to this good and growing program and space. And to talk about Youth Accountability Initiative, I think we should start talking about, the idea behind, us sitting down as young people to say, let us come and conceptualize an organization, a movement that can be able to address the fundamentals within our country. As young people have realized that one of the critical national questions in Zimbabwe is the issues to do with accountability. That's why we see people can, easily and willy-nilly give things without being questioned, without, knowing exactly where the money is coming from. So we sat down and we said, no, let us start by addressing the fundamentals. And we said, no, we want something that is data-driven. So in 2024, when the Auditor General was out, we did some mainstreaming as far as social media is concerned, whereby we were putting in place the issues that was being raised by the Auditor General. And one of the issues that we pursued, number one, was the issue around the Ministry of Youth, which brought about 17 motor vehicles. 7 were delivered, 10 were undelivered until now. And these motor vehicles were bought in 2021. And on the 7 that were delivered, 3 were not in the name of the ministry. So it means they were registered maybe in someone's name, or they were not even registered. So apart from that, there were issues around NASA. NASA back in 2003 bought land that is approximately worth 1 million. And that land till today has not been, reclaimed. So what does it mean? It means that, the money was paid, but was paid to a certain individual, a pseudo company, and the address of the company does not even exist. And Auditor General keeps on repeating this issue, and it's not being addressed. And we went to the High Court with that issue, and we are still waiting, for the legal processes to take, its course. So this was the background of us now sitting down to say, no, each and every time Auditor General comes with issues, but there is no structured engagement, structured intervention of young people to be able to deal with these critical issues of accountability. Thus, sitting down as young people, creating this movement called Youth Accountability Initiative.
There are quite a number of organizations,
yes,
that do more or less similar work as
yes,
of your organization.
yes.
So, but I want to find out what is so unique about this Youth Initiative project or a vision.
Yes.
Yes, what is so unique about it? Because there are so many organizations that they are talking about accountability issues and so forth. Could be different names, mention organizations like ZimCode,
Yes.
Accountability Lab. There are many of these. But
Yes.
what's so unique about yours?
So what happens with the issues to do with driving change? Change can be driven only with one kind of movement. That's why you see even in politics you have so many political parties, them trying to push the same agenda if it's about making sure that they address the innermost aspirations of citizens in that specific country. And coming directly to your question in terms of how then are we distinct in terms of our intervention with the issues to do with accountability. Number one, it starts by the fact that it's a youth-led organization. These organizations are organizations that are effectively working, but if you remember, these are organizations formed during, the time of the rise of the opposition and so forth. And we're trying to think to say, as young people, can we not have a youth-led voice that can be able to lure, to attract youths so that they can be able to start to engage in issues that really do matter. And our areas of intervention also are in complementary sense to those who are already established within this, work that we are doing. That's why you see us now trying to intervene. If you go on TikTok, you realize that, most of the videos that we post, because it's a youth-led, there is youth energy, they trend around issues to do with taxes, around issues to do with natural resources. The programs that we are doing, we moved away from Twitter Spaces, we are now doing, TikTok Lives. Recently, we hosted Honorable Makumire and 2.4, 2,400 viewers tuned into that live. It shows how we are trying to redefine how we engage young people. We are, on Saturday, we are going to have a Facebook Live to discuss about these issues. So our idea, our ideology is centered around how we can re-socialize the youths. Our premise, our thought process is to say we cannot re-socialize the youths in the boardrooms. We cannot re-socialize the youths in conferences. You re-socialize them to where they are socialized. Where are they socialized? You go to TikTok. Where are they socialized? You go to Facebook. But beyond that, there is need for physical convening. That's why you see us doing things like the Youth Accountability Hangout, where we are saying, no, let's create brave spaces for young people, because we are tired of the discourse of safe spaces. The difference between a brave and a safe space is a brave space, we go beyond comfort that is central in a safe space, and we start to talk about courage. How can we build beyond comfort courage for young people to be able to question power, to engage power, and hold power to account? That's why we are coming up with these innovative ways, where the young people will be chilled, but in that kind of, chilled environment, they are discussing about important intervention as far as, what we call the center nerve of the state is concerned, which is public finance.
But when we see that there are so many issues that require accountability campaigns,
yes,
or movements of some sort, what are your areas of concern?
Yes.
If you can list them maybe in the order of importance in terms of your focus,
yes,
as an organization.
So our focus area as an organization is, multi-dimensional, in a sense that we focus on three main pillars that we have thought as young people there is need of our structured engagement and intervention. We talk about public finance accountability. Since this is a movement that is born out of the realization of the gap as far as awareness, advocacy, and following up on Auditor General issues is concerned, one of our critical pillars thus is public finance accountability. So when we talk about public finance accountability, we talk about the public finance, management. We talk about issues raised by the Auditor General. Recently, the Auditor General, tried to, to explain to people how the state is being, looted, or how resources are being appropriated within MDAs, ministry, department, and agencies, and realize that as of May 2025, 40 motor vehicles, 17 fire trucks, 83 desktops, and 75 laptops were unaccounted for. These things were actually paid, but unaccounted for. What does it mean? It means either they were actually paid and delivered, but they were not delivered to the rightful people. Maybe, SCVN, buys, 2 good quality cameras. Then you can't see where they are. Maybe Costa, you took one and went with it to Victoria Falls and start, using it for personal use. So these are the issues that are happening within the government. The Auditor General also speaks about how the treasurer, the paymaster, is, is not following the Public Finance Management Act. You realize that about 1.98 billion was paid for directly from the treasurer to, to service deliveries under, MDAs, but only 1.38 was accounted for. 1.38 billion was accounted for, so which means around 597, 1.7 million was not accounted for. That money, it's a lot of money. So where is it going? These are the issues that we are trying to engage on to see how we can have intervention as young people and raise awareness to say, no, you know, there is looting that is happening hook, line and sinker, and it's only young people who can rise up to say, no, this should end, and ask important questions, not just receive things that are coming, you know, from our taxpayers, man. Question where the actual money is going.
Your vision seems to be very so clear, but I want to maybe understand what's the role young people can play in this country in terms of promoting issues of accountability, where they will be able to hold public office bearers to account for mismanaging the finances as per your vision.
So first and foremost, I think it starts around the culture. You know, Amika Cabral says every revolution is first a cultural revolution. So when you talk about culture, we talk about systems thinking. When you talk about systems thinking, we talk about how we as young people should be wired in terms of how we think. It's not about us receiving, you know, motor vehicles, receiving aqua, money for fuel, this and that. It's about asking the real structural changes that are needed. Because it's not the role of the government to give me a car. The role of the government is to provide opportunities so that I can be able to buy a car for myself. The role of the government, it doesn't make sense for the government to give us, you know, freebies, while at least if I go to the hospital to Parenyatwa, I cannot get the medicine that is required. If I go to University of Zimbabwe, you know, there are no enough lecturers for us to be able to rethink about the future, because we cannot talk about the future without education. So it's about thinking that way to say, let us address the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? Education. What are the fundamentals? Issues to do with health. What are the fundamentals? Issues to do with bread and butter issues. Within the issues of households, are we able, you know, when we go to school, we're being told that one of the key to success is education. But if you go to school now, after you graduate, you know, people are now going outside the country. They are going to South Africa. They are going all over and see what's happening in South Africa, you know, because our people are not being catered for. Because we believe that the government is the parent of the society. So if the government abrogates its role of making sure that they safeguard us, which are the children of the government, then we should be able to rise up and question, to say, no, what we do not want are not these, you know, gift or so forth. What we want is for you to address the fundamentals that each and every one of us can be able to benefit. So that's what we are trying to do, to make sure that young people start to think in that way. And when we talk about the culture, we talk about how they think, we can actually be able now to knock sense, to say, no, these are the issues that the Order General is talking about. Let us raise awareness. But let us go beyond awareness, you know. Let us use the areas of engagements that we have. Let us make sure that the honorable members of parliament that are deployed under the youth, the youth quota, let us give them a mandate to say each and every Wednesday, we want you to ask these particular questions that are holding our future hostage.
So I believe that whatever you're raising, it must be existing already in the public. People know. But then the question will be, how do you get young people to get them organized and start to practically hold the office bearers to account, those who are misusing public funds, those who are misusing public resources to account? How do you get them organized? Particularly in this era where we see that there is an avalanche of dishing out of freebies, like cars, cash, and so on. This is the generation that is now getting used to this kind of incentives. How do you then get them organized to then hold them to account? We're in the era of Gananda, yeah.
So when you talk about everyone knows, I think it's a misrepresentation to an extent. Was there actually people who don't know about these things that are happening? And we should go beyond knowing, because if we go ideological, you realize there's a difference between political consciousness and political conscience. So political consciousness is that ability of being able to know, to say that this money is being looted, this and that, these motor vehicles were not delivered. But when you talk about political conscience, is the aftermath of knowing what to do after you have been able to absorb the information that you have been given. So for us to be able to deal with the issues of the political conscience, which is one of your priorities that you are saying, how can we make sure that young people are then later engaged? You know, issues to do with money. Money that you have not yet handled does not make sense. You know, when we were young people, we thought $100 is a lot of money, because we were yet to hold it. Now, you know, $100, you see that if you try to pay fees, it doesn't even balance. If you try to do your errands as far as going to work, it doesn't balance. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to make these digits make sense to young people. How do they make sense? You relate them to the material needs of them. So for example, to say if 597.7 million is unaccounted for, what can that money do for you in terms of roads? What can that money do for you in terms of hospitals? What can it do for you in terms of making sure that if you are at university, you are doing sciences, research materials are available, lecturers are available. The system itself is working towards to make sure that we emancipate young people from poverty. So it's about us, you know, occupying the unconventional spaces. For the civil society has been about calling young people to say, come and let's gather. But we are saying, no, instead of us saying, come and let's gather and reason together, we are saying we are coming to where you are and we can reason together there. That's why you see us saying, you know, let us redefine, let us start to talk about these issues on TikTok. And we're very much surprised, you know, to say that 2.4 people can join. And if you go and listen to that, you know, interview, to that discussion we're having, young people were asking critical questions to the Honorable Member of Parliament. And it shows how young people just need to be engaged where they are, because, you know, because of the environment that we're operating in, there is also a need for us to be able to make best use of the social media that we have and bring in alternative discourses that can become superior logic within society. That's the only way that we can then be able to absorb, attract, and have young people sit down and gather. And it's not a journey that we can give a specific time bound to say we'll be able to achieve this kind of political consciousness after this long. You know, the issues that Steve Biko were addressing as far as fighting apartheid was concerned, you know, it didn't start one day, it didn't end there. Right now, still, you know, people are still struggling to have a black identity within Africa. And these are issues that you just started. So it's about us just getting into this space and contributing to what we can, but it goes beyond Youth Accountability Initiative, and it requires each and every one of us to be engaged. We just do as little as we can to push the change that we need.
And they have said, I'll repeat this, you have a very clear vision that you want accountability in terms of the usage of, let's say, taxes.
Yes.
People are paying taxes. We pay license fees to Sinara.
Yes.
Why are roads like this?
Yes.
We pay toll fees. We pay ZBC radio license fees, but what we get, we're not happy with the service. But the question is, the young people, you've got a competing incentive.
Yes.
From the Rigananda discourse, where these freebies are being dished out even to young people themselves. How do they get involved in these accountability issues? Because there's a certain quota of this constituency that is benefiting.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you intend to compete with that setup at the moment?
So I think I'll go back to what I said in terms of the thought process, but beyond that, so that I can satisfy, you know, you as far as answering that is concerned. It's also about showing young people what opportunities can do to them more than being given a car. It doesn't make sense for me to be given a car right now if I cannot be able to sustain basic issues like now dealing with fuel. I was at University of Zimbabwe, studied data science and systems. So now when, for example, we are now working, and you are given a car, which after the exchange of the car, you cannot be able to buy fuel. A car cannot be able to sustain the family that young people are, dreaming of starting. A car cannot buy basic, things that are required within your household. What can give you all those things is, number one, a structured intervention that is around opportunities. So we are saying, no, your thought process should not be about the now as young people, but now I have a car. What about in the moment whereby, the car is now wanting to take from me, because car is expensive, expenses that are related to it, fuels, so many things, motel, you can, talk about all the things that you want. And it's not everyone, by the way, who have been given that car. And you realize that, opportunities should not come in that, kind of manner. It doesn't mean that those who have been given those cars are the most hardworking within society. Mm-hmm. Most probably no. So we are saying no, this is just a pool of young people. Takatowaisa apa Costa, our 100 to our PYs. So what they will do, they will attract you and lure you to say, if you see that Masiwa Piwa, maybe Mangwana.
It is the influence that they hold then, which becomes a question in terms of motivating others. Like, for example, I'll give you someone who is a comedian, is given a car, is got a commanding, large following of young people there. So yes, it could be one or two people who might have been given, and you, on the face of it, there is no huge effect. But anyway, let's also go beyond just this narrative on the Kanan and motivating young people to be part in being able to hold office bearers who misappropriate funds to account. Let's look at it as the Youth Accountability Initiative. What is your appreciation of the value that the citizens are getting out of the taxes, cocktail of taxes that they are paying in today's Zimbabwe?
So, it's a very sad issue that we are talking about. We recently had a Youth Accountability Initiative, and we were doing what we were calling our Youth Accountability Hangout. We're doing what we're calling an accountability cafe. So accountability cafe with 3, tables that were focusing on different issues. And one of the issues were issues around tax. And young people, the issues to do with, when we go and buy chicken slice, there's fast food tax that is, taken when you buy your fuels, this and that, there's carbon tax you top of. When we do simple transactions of sending to your girlfriend, $10, Mutulino is there to take their MTT tax. When you want to do the in-drive things, they are telling you taking digital withholding tax. If you talk about Netflix, everywhere that you go, the government is taking the money. And we understand that government sustains itself through the taxpayers' money. But the aftermath of it, that is what we are questioning. We are not saying don't tax us. We are saying if you tax us, then you should, account, because that's the concept of social contract, Costa, to say that relationship between the governed and, the governors is around how we give them power, because they govern at our mercy. Because the money that, they are using the government coffers coming from the taxes of, citizens, in general, and young people in specific. So we are saying, when there is fast food tax, that is supposed to go and buy, cancer machines. We should be able to see those cancer machines in place. If you are, people are paying toll gates, if you are paying taxes, what's happening with our roads? Is it not the money that is coming back to us as gifts?
But as Youth Initiative, what is so absurd? Maybe if you can just list 2 and the justifications in terms of the taxes with no value.
So if we go to first tax, which is the tax, fast food tax, these are a bunch of, is an umbrella term called sin taxes, which are taxes that are taken from people so that we can be able to take care, of the diseases that come with eating fast food tax. If it's about smoking, there's a tax that comes so that we can deal with the diseases that come with that. But if you see the fast food tax, which is 1%, that is taken, but more than 5 million was raised, during the last quarter. But where are the cancer machines? If you go to Parenyatwa, you can't get those. So it means that there is mismanagement, or there is unclear information to say, actually, is this tax supposed to be taken and be used for this kind of particular matter. And when we talk about that, we also talk of the IMTT tax, intermediate money transfer tax. Why is it that? Because as young people, we make transactions, and when we make transactions, IMTT is making every small transaction expensive. When you want to buy anything, you want to buy something online using EcoCash, because nowadays most of our money is now mobile money. That's why you even see that even at the ZANU-PF conference, people were calling, the ruling party were calling to say, no, should get rid of this 2% tax. Why is it the austerity measures? We are still doing the austerity for prosperity now. After how long has Mtuleni been the Minister of Finance? So these are some of the two taxes that we think, and obviously, the increase in terms of that, because it affects everyone. So you cannot, basic economics, you cannot tax, people out of poverty. What you need to do is to industrialize. So that is the main issues, which when we have time, we talk about our other pillar, natural resources, on how we can domestically mobilize resources apart from taxes, how we can start to talk about value retention, value addition, and beneficiation of our minerals. We talk of lithium, we talk of gold, and the Chinese influx that has been happening in Zimbabwe.
And as youth accountability initiatives, do you think maybe the Zimbabwean youth, the Zimbabwean young people, do you have an appreciation of the effect of these taxes and the service of value that they should be getting out? Is there that awareness in terms of your engagements?
So in terms of our engagement, there is less awareness as far as how, these taxes are detrimental. Why am I saying so? When you go and buy Costa to Chicken Inn, they've already put a blanket, cost to say this chicken slice is for $5 and so forth. So when you buy, it's, if you want to hide something, anything generally from people, put it in writing or in a book. So no one really, starts reading the receipt to say this is for $5, but about $1 is going for taxes. So the difference with other societies, if you go to America, you'll be told that, this camera it costs around $2,000. But when you want to pay, they will say you are now paying 2.5. Then you ask yourself, where is the 500 coming from? They will tell you that it's a tax. So there is a hard realization in that kind of system. And the system that we have, which automatically deducts tax, sometimes it misleads people into thinking that this is the actual cost of the product. So this is now our role to make sure that we break these things down. So people, get to understand. We are working on a campaign where young people should be able to go and buy, their fast foods and, post to say, this is the actual cost, but, this amount is going to taxes. And after we have that awareness of how much we are paying, we can then be able to equate to say, is what we are paying equal to the service that we are getting? So it's around the way that tax is deducted. If we talk of payee and income tax, you realize that, if you are getting around $900 and you are in a certain tax bracket, already it's deducted already before you are given. But in other countries, Costa, you are given the 900. If you have to remit 200, you then remove 200 and give back to the government. So that process alone gives you a better appreciation to say, I'm actually paying the government. So it's about us trying to educate people for them to see beyond what they are getting and start to read through these things.
And let's look at maybe another critical area. I think you have explained in detail in terms of the effect and the awareness of the taxation in this country. Let's move a bit to issues of corruption.
Yes.
It's one of the things that has been recorded to be so rampant. How are the young people affected, in your view, as the YAI?
So I think, Costa, the issues to do with corruption, it's a national crisis, if not an African crisis, of the way that we talked about, the way that you think. Before we even talk about those in government, between the two of us, Costa, in your everyday way of life, how corrupt are you? With the little resources that are available to you, how corrupt are you? Before we talk about how this big money is being spent within the government, even if you talk of the councils, if you talk of, those who call themselves alternatives, if you talk of the ruling party, everywhere. So it's something, it's a virus within society. And we go back to Amilcar Cabral. Every revolution is first, a cultural revolution. Let's start by, redefining how we think, Costa. Are you able to say, we drive a motor yako pepe, pane chisaini chakanzi stop ongopfuura, or kungopfuura pa red robot, then poya police. Are you able to say, Costa, kuti ndoda kuenda kupolice ndinonoibhadharira ikoko and ndoda kumpa $2 yekuti aende? So these are, because ndopanotangira society, Costa, because tisati tasvika pauti iwewe maybe wazoita president wasati zvatangira pasi asapa. So it's a cultural thing that we should be able to deal with. But going back, to the broader canvas of how within government, these things are operating, it's also a lack of systems, Costa. Systems to do with checks and balances, whereby, the parliament that is supposed to act as an oversight to the executive is sometimes captured. So it's very hard for them to ask questions. And themselves, they received 40,000 as loans. But do you even know the repayment, details as far as to say how do they repay that? Did anyone repay that 40,000? No. And we expect those people to give an oversight. They'll be asked, anyway, just remember, we gave you 40,000 as loans. So all those things, it's a very complex, and it needs to start from the bottom up for us to, I think it needs people like Mao, and people who are so, I don't want to
but maybe to be more specific, what does the young person suffer in Zimbabwe with that kind of system, culture, the levels of corruption as you're explaining them? What does the young person suffer?
So, we recently have Youth Accountability Hangout, and there is someone who did a good poem, was doing poetry. He said, young people would benefit much if the HR would value what I know more than who I know. So that's where young people are also affected. To say, when you finish your A-levels, you finish your degrees, then you want to get a job. Sometimes not the best are getting the jobs that are available. Why? Because it's always about who you know.
So the competent young people are being deprived of the opportunities to release their potential.
That's why you see them going to America. That's why you see them in corruption. If you go to Ashton Park, there is a road that was being constructed, Harare Drive. Look how it is now. It's not the dusty road, the other road beside. So these are the things that affect our daily life. Even if you see the structure of our roads, we realize that the accidents, some that are happening, others it's because of maybe how people are driving, but most of them are being driven. If you go outside South Africa, not somewhere cool, go to South Africa, you see the quality of roads that they have, and all those things, they affect young people in terms of how we generally live.
And what is the young person within the Youth Accountability Initiative going to do with these challenges? Yes.
So I think, ultimately it's around, making sure that people act, number one, in a way knowing that they have a role to play within society. So what we have to do as young people is to ask critical questions. What we have to do as young people is to move beyond asking and start engaging, move beyond engaging and start holding those into power account. Amilcar Cabral would say, I'm not a liberator, there are no liberators. People liberate themselves. It's about individuals.
You seem to love this scholar, eh?
It's about these individuals, that should be able to say, I am, my own savior. How are you your own savior? It starts, small as a young person. Kwauri koko. Are you part and parcel of the person who is feeding into, sataenda kure kwangada kuenda kwezvikananda nechivi. Iwewe pauri kutobreaka marules musociety, hautomhanya here unoti ndokupai chimari. Pautoenda as a young person kuchikoro, hausunotenga here ma-assignments and so forth. These are the basic things, that young people should pay. But as Youth Accountability Initiative, it's about now creating a movement of young people that can be able to speak up, a movement of political young people, but non-partisan young people, to say, this is not about that party, this party. It's about taxes, it's not about that part, about this part. It's about healthcare system, not about that part or this part. It's about how, as young people, we are being deprived of opportunities, that we are now going outside and being treated, like slaves in other countries, or at least we have a country and a continent that we call ours, which have vast resources that should just be effectively used and translated into material innermost aspirations of young people.
You spoke about how distinct your organization is. Just wondering the influence that the young people who would have graduated or who have been benefited, who would have benefited from your services of awareness and so forth, are going to exert the influence in terms of fighting the corruption, which has been described as a scourge, as it has earned so many titles and names in this country. Yeah.
So in terms of, the influence that, people that pass through the Youth Accountability Initiative is concerned, recently we were just scrolling on TikTok, then I saw one of, a young lady who came to our activities. She went to South Africa, to Cape Town. Then she was just, taking videos, taking how she just went into a hospital, she booked for a doctor, she got, the medicine that she wanted without paying anything. And she's someone with just a passport. She's not asked to, many questions. After that, she's going to a mall. She's actually shocked that, things that we call malls in Zimbabwe, Costa, if you go to other countries, if you go to Kwame Mall, Century Mall, if you know the actual malls, go to other countries. These are the things that young people should start to envy. So that's some of the influence that we are doing. So young people are waking up to say, no, when I'm exposed to something, I relate these things to the things that we were discussing and debating about, to say, no, we should be able to start asking questions to the government, because some other countries are doing it. Why can't we do it too?
We look at how corruption is embedded in various systems, service providers. If you go to a driving school right now, if you go to VID, where people would want to get their licenses and so
It's
on.
150.
And the young, the most of the people who will be requiring such services are the young people. The question then will be the influence that the young people can put in fighting this corruption. Because you also have to understand the Gen Z culture and tradition. They want things at a faster pace, no patience, no what. Just pay $10 and go. If you don't want to pay, you might wait 6 hours, 4 hours, and so on. These are the people that you seek to change their mindset. And this is the challenge that is before your organization now. Yeah.
And it's not, it's not an easy answer and an easy task, because it's not a one-fold kind of strategy. Because we are talking about, individuals. We are talking about the systems, and we don't live in isolation. We live within a system. And as you are saying, there are some of the things that you say without paying $10 ikako, zongazokufambira zvachose. But since we are just trying to give an alternative thought to say, where you can, while we are trying to solve this grand, corruption that is within the system, where you can start by embedding a culture of holding yourself to account. Where you can, these small things, sometimes not about, dreaming too big to say, in 2 years, we want to make sure that, no one is misallocating funds, no one is taking fuel coupons if it's parliament without the approval of the treasurer, as the Auditor General would highlight. Sometimes it's about starting small as young people to say, how do we, organize ourselves and start to not make it fashionable for me. Ndakaenda pakiwo remukuru ndotonotsvaka gadhi pasera apa kuti handinotrash $100 andasenderwa namukoma wangu ndichakusira chi5 ndijambise kiwo. Takatanga kuva those simple ideas of being patient, as we are saying. I think that's when we can be able to start fighting the issues to do with corruption. Because mazuva ano munhu andozoti chero ndakabatwa nemapurisa hautosvike kustation. And mwana udzoti kutosvika station vaimechabhadhariswa $30 chanobiwa futi. So zvinaa ndingogara ndaparticipate hangu mucorruption nekupa munhu 5. But we are saying let us start to rethink our way of doing things as society.
The question will be, what is the price for holding myself with integrity in as far as all these menaces that we are discussing are concerned, corruption, not being involved in accountability issues. What is the price for that, for being maintaining integrity in my interaction with these institutions where I'll be going wanting services? If I get stopped driving along the road by the police, shouldn't I just give them $2? What is the incentive for holding myself with integrity as a young person in this country?
So it's actually a good question and a challenging one to say, as young people, then what is it for me to be able to abide with these rules, or at least the whole system is broken down? But if everyone would have said that we couldn't have attained independence right now, if everything could have said that Nelson Mandela would have just left everything that they were doing with the ANC, with Pan-African Congress to say no, others are actually joining the apartheid police. So why should we sacrifice ourselves for this? But it's those small steps in terms of changing, the culture at a small level that can culminate, that can, cascade up to us changing the system at large. Because the system is vicious, because what we are trying to do is sometimes it's about, there is someone who said if a leader rules a country long enough, the character of the leader eventually becomes the character of society. So we want to reach an extent whereby, Costa, if a young person is going to wake up one day saying, I want to be a member of parliament, if we had started as small that the reason why, even the feminist movement is saying, let us cage them young, wakomana, varume, abusive, this and that. Let us cage them. Vasati vatusvika kuvarume, ngatange kuvaudza no, being a man doesn't mean you have to be toxic. Being a man doesn't mean that you have to exert violence. Being a man doesn't mean that you deploy your masculinity to resolve conflict. That's the things that we are trying to do, to say, no, it might be hard for me to wake up and change the manners of all the members of parliament.
What is your response? You are into the communities, you're in the communities and you're doing your engagements. And there comes a question from a young person who says, what is even the purpose for me to enroll for a program at your university when I'm seeing someone who is not seen even the doors of a university or his levels of education are still questionable, but is able to get tenders that are worth millions of dollars? Why should I waste my time in school when you've got people who can just get tenders, they get rich overnight? How would you respond to such a question, such a person who is not even seeing the value of going into school? Because he's seeing other people who have not gone to school or who have questionable educational levels getting or awarded tenders worth of millions of dollars. These are the questions coming from the youth in your communities.
Yes, and these are the questions that are coming, but we are also, in terms of response, there is a skewed way of thinking to think that education is the key to making, a living. We should start by challenging that, Costa, to say going to university doesn't mean that we're going there to unlock. Because if you go back to the structure of the education that we are dealing with right now, Costa, you realize that we are getting educated for us to go and work as an accountant somewhere, to go and work as a lawyer, to go and work as a doctor, but we have done a little as far as harnessing what an individual, himself or herself, has as gift. If you go to other countries, because of vast of the opportunities that are being created through innovations, I've met so many brilliant young people. Someone who came to our accountability hangout who is running a tech, startup, realized that this person did not even pass through university. I don't know from 4, but it took, himself to say, no, I want to learn about coding. I want to do this. So first, in responding your answer, going to university is not the key to making money. It's not the key to living a life. Living a life should come through hard work, should come, through being able to translate your skills into producing something. Because, Costa, there is no substitute to production if you want to make a living. You should be able to produce, be it hard goods, be it agriculture, be it providing services. So that's the first thing that we should talk about. But answering the second question around, the second part of the answer, around the issues to say, no, why should I then, as I was speaking, someone would ask, why should I then be able to be a hard worker, be able to have those skills, while is there someone who's just getting tender? If you realize, number one, one thing that I would say, it's not everyone who is getting, money through that. So it's not like you're going to be that person. So you have to understand that you should have your way of working and getting the money. And also, it's about authentic way of living that we should embrace as young people. Are you not proud to be people like Elon Musk? We can differ in terms of, political ideology and the way that he wants to organize society. But are we not proud by someone who creates those things? Are you not proud of being Strive Masiwa, a person who actually worked?
Dangote.
Are you not proud of being Dangote? You are only just proud of being that person that we all know. No, you can't be proud of that.
Yeah, but the danger is these are the role models for the young people. And you are dealing with young constituents that is looking to. I saw something on social media where a very young person was saying, when I grow up, I want to be like this person. And that person is associated with cutting corners. Doesn't really follow the proper route of, getting money and so on. This has become a role model to young people, and this is what you're dealing with.
So I don't want us to be on a slippery slope whereby we're also using what others can call fallacy of composition to say what's true to one is true to all. Because if we try to go that road, we cannot sanctify the whole society. But most of the young people, that we sometimes interact with, they are young people that actually need opportunities for them to be able to work for themselves. There are very few. And if you even see those young people that are supporting, those narratives of giving cars and so forth, if you look at those young people and you sit with them down, deep down, their innermost aspirations is not to get a car. Their innermost aspirations is to be able to get a car for themselves through opportunities. So I don't know which statistical representation are we using to say that young people are inspired. Let us not confuse desperation and the actual way that young people think. There is no young person who is inspired by that kind of behavior, but because of desperation, then just say, because the material conditions are the ones that can also determine the way that we think, but the way that we act, but it doesn't really say about the way that we think and the way that we feel. So let us not confuse the two.
Mr. Masiwa, we've spoken at length. I would want us to conclude this conversation, you by telling or advising young people in terms of how they should carry themselves in as far as preserving integrity is concerned, shying away from corruption, shying away from freebies and incentives, and maintaining integrity, and also develop the skills of holding these office bearers to account. What skills they need, just give them a word of advice.
Okay, I think first and foremost, it starts with the culture, with thinking. As young people, let us not think in partisan way. Let us think in a political way. What do we mean? It's not about political parties. It's not about that part or this part. It's about addressing the material realities that we are facing as young people, questioning those in power, questioning, those in politics, without looking at which side. If corruption is done by this party, it should be named as it is. If it's done by the other party, it should be named as it is. That's how we can be able to build societies. And to young people, it's about working hard in those small spaces that we occupy. I was listening this other day, I was reading this other book by Michelle Obama, The Light We Carry, and he said, sometimes it's not about having those big dreams of saying, I want to be the president, I want to change this country to make sure that we all have roads. Sometimes it's about the immediate successes that we can have as young person. If we are already all level, the immediate success that you should focus on is just holding yourself with integrity, finishing your O level and having good grades. Already A level, that's the same. Already university, that's the same. But cannot go toward that path that is the traditional and probably not the most effective way of making money. You can go the other way of enhancing your skills, of tapping into your gifts, exerting hard work towards the realization of what you need as young people. And beyond and above, young people should read. For you to be able to have the political consciousness, for you to be able to maneuver life as it is, there is the need for young people to read. Whatsoever that you are reading, but actually be able to be in a position of reading. We've been, traumatized by these TikToks, we've been traumatized by the social media, but there is something that comes with reading hard books, that comes with reading good content, that can be able to maneuver within this broken society, which ultimately needs us to be able to revamp it into something that we want.
The question for the young people, how they should arise and hold public office bearers to account, questioning the usage of their taxes, questioning how resources are being distributed in this country. Where is our gold? What is it doing to our lives? What is happening to our diamonds? What is happening to, in terms of everything, the resources that we gather, or that are gathered, that are collected by various agencies, Zimra, Zinara, and so forth. This is the message that is coming from the Youth Accountability Initiative, and is saying that every young person in this country must arise, must awake, must open their eyes, and must ask questions that matter. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for continuously following us, and thank you so much for sharing this very important episode to other colleagues, friends, locally, internationally, abroad. Thank you very much. Until next time, I'm signing out.